Welcome to the Game of Attention podcast, the podcast led by industry leaders exploring creative in a technologically advancing world. Hear from experts across the CPG industry, navigating creative effectiveness across channels such as advertising, e-commerce, and in-store. Released twice monthly, this is the podcast you don't want to miss.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Game of Attention podcast powered by Dragonfly AI. I'm your host, Sophie Pain, a senior customer success manager here at Dragonfly AI. And today I'm thrilled to be joined by two brilliant guests from Tata, Lily and Madhukar. In this episode, we will be diving into a fascinating conversation on data-driven creativity, how to make confident design decisions. We'll explore how creativity and analytics can work hand in hand and what that means to trust your data as much as your instincts, and how leading teams are using insights to fuel design success at scale. So whether you're a marketer, designer, strategist, or just curious about the intersection of AI and creative decision making, this one is for you. Lily, would you mind introducing yourself before we get started?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for the invitation of having me. It's an honor to be here this morning with you. My name is Lily Jauregui. I am the head of innovation for Tata. I have overall about almost nearly 20 years experience in marketing, and thrilled to be joining you this morning.
Yeah, hi, I'm Madhukar Subramanian. I am a marketing director at packaged beverages in the India business of Tata Consumer Products. I lead marketing for a $150 million value brand portfolio. And I've had the privilege of working across markets from rural India to urban China. But I describe myself more as someone who's fascinated by how technology can help brands tell more authentic stories.
So I guess, Lily, we'll start with some of the questions, and I'm going to direct the first one at you, if that's okay. So what does data-driven creativity mean to you in practice? And what do you think brands need to watch out for?
I think data-driven creativity is incredibly important. And even though we are in an environment where we want to move at a really fast pace and we want to be incredibly agile with our decisions and how do we reach the market, it is super important to still be addressing the right consumer insights and the right category context. I think in order for either if you're going to have a new brand that is going to be launching to market, or is it going to be a line extension for an existing brand, or is it just going to be a new SKU, fundamentally, you need to know why you want to do this and why your brand is the right brand to address this. So when you have a very strong insight on what you want to address and deliver, then the creativity of how you deliver that will follow. So if we just focus on being creative without having the right insights, we don't necessarily are setting ourselves for the best foundation of success. So being able to have those insights, understanding your consumer, understanding your demand, understanding the category, regardless of how long your journey is going to be from, the moment you decide you want to launch or to the moment you actually reach the market, it's fundamentally important. So I think if you think about brands and what do they need to actually watch out for, is ensuring that they are actually meeting something that is a need for consumers. If you are a new brand that wants to play in a category that it's already saturated, it's how you make sure you are actually delivering something that is distinctive to the consumer, something that it's worth paying more for in some occasions, right? Because we are in this competitive environment where we don't only need to sell stories to customers, but we also have our retailers and our channels, right? And it's convincing them first that whatever we're going to put out there is actually going to deliver more sales and grow the category. So when we have those fundamental things done right, then the storytelling will flow, and hopefully it will translate into the incremental sales that we want to as a business.
That's so true. I liked what you said about launching into a new category as well. A lot of brands are spending a lot of time and effort into seeing what else is out there and seeing how they can expand their business. So that was really insightful. Thank you, Lily.
Yeah, to me, creativity springs from a combination of keen observation, spotting the unseen dots and connecting them. I can share two examples of this in practice. One of our largest tea brands, Tata Tea Agni, is a brand which stands for Josh, which is a Hindi word for passion. So the proposition for the brand really is awakening mind and fueling inspiration. So the target consumer group for us is homemakers across India. And the insight we had, and Lily spoke about the insight being the key. The insight we had was that the work that homemakers do at home is not really seen as work because it simply has no monetary value, attached to it. So it's a unique brand of passion that is, largely invisible and unseen. So passion that is unseen was the consumer void that we were working with. And now we also know that picture speaks 1,000 words. So basically what we did was we had an AI campaign, which basically has a tool at the center of it, which analyzes visual consumer data, in the form of pictures uploaded by consumers on WhatsApp, and converts that into an inspiring and emotional story of their passion. It's very contextual because it's based on the pictures that the consumers upload, and it features them as the hero of the TV commercial. So that is something which really broke the clutter and set us on a new growth path. The second example is on a Jauregui campaign. So Jauregui is basically a purpose-led marketing platform with Tata team, where we pick large social issues and try to mobilize actions around them. So just to give you an idea, in the past we've picked things like corruption or women's voting rights in India, and so on. So in its current edition, we've picked up climate change, which is the defining crisis of our times. So after having created awareness and recognition of the issue, the key challenge for us was to get people to act. So the insight here was that, as individuals, we think that our actions don't count, right? But what if you did know the impact of your actions? So here's where AI can help us. So we worked with Google to develop a similarly, WhatsApp-based AI tool, which basically parses, again, visual consumer data of consumers performing green actions and tells them, in an evocative way as to how much difference they're making. So, these are basically examples of how we can use data-driven creativity to present things in a different way to get different responses from consumers. So that's the key here. But the watch out is that we should not treat data as absolute, right? Because some things cannot be coded into data, and it's best to use judgment and intuition and a general understanding of the bigger picture to ensure that you make the right decisions to drive the best outcomes.
That's so true. And I think nobody knows the consumer as well as some people that have been in the brands for a really long time. And I think that's where creativity can sometimes stem from, a nice mix of the two. But it sounds like, Madhukar, you got some really great examples there. Did you get some really great feedback from the consumers as well as the business for both of those? Because they are a little bit outside of the norm, those two campaigns.
Yeah. So that's really important for us. Feedback at every stage is really very important for us. And at times we also get feedback at the time of ideation, right? So that's a very exciting stage where we actually get consumers to weigh in on the data and really the idea and the creative that we have. And it's amazing to see live reactions. They can junk the idea or they really like it, and you can see it in their faces. So that's really amazing.
So building on that, once you have that mindset, the next challenge is execution, as we all know. And in today's hyper-competitive market and omnichannel world, how do you go about making design decisions that serve both the brand and the shopper in a cluttered environment?
Something that is really important, if we think about specifically how AI plays a role within this specific point, right? Whenever we are sometimes I find in the innovation landscape, you're exposed to so much information. And whenever you actually thinking about cutting decisions and getting, the cut through that you want across different channels, is AI can provide that kind of blind spot information that sometimes we don't necessarily reach when we are having conversations, because we might have a bias, or we might be looking at a lot at the same information. So the way we use it is we use it to feed the content or the stimuli that we are going to create. So a good example of that is I could talk about maybe within the tea category internationally, sleep. It's a huge need, and it's a really, really big segment, but it has already been addressed by multiple big brands, and it's a well-established category. So whenever we want to address sleep, we have to do it in a way that is differentiated and that could really resonate with the shoppers, and at the same time tell a story that is new and different for the category and for the retailers. So that's where AI can help, and we can feed the algorithm to to create new concepts, to bring new ideas, to just like bring us a completely new and fresh thinking. And it could be specifically brief to do that. And we can say, these are all the things that we already know about the category. We want you to bring concepts or ideas that are completely away from what is existent, but are still relevant to sleep. When we have that, we can feed that into a creative execution, right? And this is how a packaging could look like. These are the sort of ingredients that we could put on the blend that are relevant for the segment, but are different from what is existent. And once you have that stimuli, then you have to go and put it in front of shoppers, right? And you have to get actual validation from consumers to say, does this actually resonate with you? Like, is this something that you will buy? Is this something that you find interesting? Is this something that you will actually associate with the brand, right? But all the stimuli comes from a very agile place of the insights that we know already versus with new thinking from AI. And that gets put in front of a consumer and gets challenged by real people, right? And that's how we are able to feed the innovation pipeline and actually say, oh, this is the right way to move forward, or these concepts are probably a bit too far away still from where we need to go. And that way we can finesse and make sure we develop propositions that are much more ready to succeed.
Yeah, so being in a food and beverage space, the insight really is that these are things that you consume, and therefore taste varies a lot region to region, and a lot of it is driven by your sense of identity, and it's rooted in culture. So this understanding is what underpins our design decisions when it comes to Tata Tea in India. So on our tea brands, we use a lot of culture cues when it comes to packaging, right? We are pioneers in the hyper-local marketing approach in India, where we have specific marketing mixes for specific states in India. So a lot of our brand language is around, passion points related to culture, such as handlooms. You would see, sari art, craft, a lot of geographic symbols of pride. So the role of brand design in such a context is really to evoke that regional pride to drive preference for the brand. So everything from packaging to DVC to in-store assets, they have this design code. And this is our definitive signature. And that's how brand decisions are made. And specifically in the shopper environment, how we translate that into a shopper environment is we use the see, choose, buy framework, which is about designing to catch attention at a 10-meter level, which is what we call C. And then once you do that, you try and get into the consideration set of the shoppers at a 5-meter level. It's the choose element. So we are conscious about that. And finally, we deliver the reason to buy once the product is in the hand. So that's the buy part of it. So we ensure that all of our design accounts for each of these stages and helps deliver on objectives.
And of all those stages, is there a particular priority for you and your brands, or do you treat them all as equal along the process?
It's a moment in time kind of a priority. At a 10-meter level, it's about just catching attention and focusing only on that, not over-indexing on the other parts. And once you get closer, various other elements gain prominence. So not all at the same time, but each of them play a specific role at different points in time.
I'm glad you said that, because for me as well, I think it's super important to have that consistency along that creative process and prioritizing different elements to match how the shopper's going to be in store, which is awesome. Okay, so I think we have painted a little bit of a good picture in the complexity of decision making there. But of course, designing for attention is only part of the puzzle. Lily, how do you test or validate if a piece of creative will emotionally connect with a specific region or a cultural group?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one, right? Because even though we are all human, right, and we have loads of needs, like fundamental needs in common when you think about, maybe food and beverages, like markets can be so different in terms of the preference and the things that resonate with them. Like, if we stick to the example of tea, right? Like the tea culture in the UK, it's completely different from a tea culture in the US or Canada or Australia. Like they cannot be more different, right? In terms of, the emotion and the values that are associated with consuming tea in the UK are completely different to the values in other countries, right? So whenever we want to bring innovation that is relevant internationally, we need to look at, okay, what are the markets that are priority? How does the category look like on those markets? How do we make sure we prioritize what innovation goes where? And then we can create a different set of concepts that, based on the insights of that, or more kind of like generic insights or category insights from different markets, how we think they could potentially work across different regions. Once those ones are built, the best way to actually get some information is to put them in front of them, right? And it can be done in an incredibly agile way, where we can use AI to create the concepts, and we can use AI to create a potential packaging proposition, and then put that in front of consumers and get feedback on a virtual workshop where we can get qualitative and quantitative insights, right? And we can ask, would you buy this, and get an idea in terms of the metrics that are important, because you always need to have a very, very clear action standard in terms of what you want that innovation to deliver, right? It could be purchase intention, right, which is something that we always want to be within norm or above norm. It could be distinctiveness, right, because we really want this product to deliver something that is new and different, right? And you have the quantitative mention there. But when you put something in front of consumers, their immediate reaction, do you like it? You don't like it? What are the things that you actually, what resonates with you within the packaging? Like this copy is something that resonates with your lifestyle, or it really doesn't have anything to do with what you normally do. And we been able to find opposites, right? Sometimes some concepts resonate really well in an area of the world and not at all in other places. But the other thing that can be sometimes surprising is you might be able to find one concept that is successful regionally. And when that happens, it's like the jackpot, right? It's like we have something that can be executed internationally, potentially with some tweaks. And it's getting that kind of like that. It's through those conversations with the audience in different regions that we can tweak the creative or the emotional execution to really talk to them. So let's say a master brand could look exactly the same way internationally, but the way the copy is written, or the way the brand shows up, or the channel strategy could then be modified to ensure it's meeting the expectations of the needs of those consumers regionally.
That's so interesting. And I love that we're still talking about tea, because you're so right. It does hit differently in different countries. As a Brit, I am a big tea drinker. I know exactly how it resonates with me and my friends and my family as well. But I also know that when I travel abroad and I go to America, it never hits the same. The tea is always different out there, and they speak about it differently. It's definitely a culture thing, especially for us Brits. And nothing beats an afternoon tea, I'll tell you that for free. I found it really interesting the way that you said that sometimes you have to go a little bit niche and a bit more into the different cultures to, I guess, fully personalize the brands and the executions on a really local level. But I guess, like you said, it really is a jackpot for a brand when you can do something that's a lot more universal. Obviously, the time and money along the way too, but it also brings a full umbrella view to the brand as well. Makes it probably feel quite a lot more holistic internally when you can talk about something that hits the same in different countries, especially with your colleagues that are international too.
It just helps so much with the execution, because if there is a fundamental of the understanding of how the brand should operate internationally, what are the restrictions, what are the things that we can focus and talk about globally, or the things that we need to restrict ourselves potentially internationally, then it makes the execution more flawless and easier to translate and understand across different markets.
As consumers, we are always in grip of emotional forces. And it's super important for us that we don't get too stuck in rational creatives. I think I cannot emphasize that more. And what we've seen is emotion comes from various sources. Like I'd mentioned previously, how we use culture cues. So, for instance, in a specific brand that we have in South India, we use the design language of sari art. It's basically garment that the women wear. It's super famous, and it's a symbol of pride for them. So that drives emotion. We've seen amazing reactions from consumers on that. The second thing which works is music. I think music, we make sure that our creatives get the music right. That's really a great moment of connection with our consumers. And finally, in India, what I've seen is language, and even in China, language plays a big role. And if you get the language nuances right, I think that goes a great deal in getting a really good emotional quotient for your creatives. So we do that, and at every stage we are very conscious as to what the consumers think. So we do a lot of consumer work. I previously also mentioned that even during the ideation stage, we get them to weigh in on ideas, and of course, post recall. The post launch, we look at recall as a surrogate for emotional connect to just see if you're going the right direction.
And I like the idea of personalizing on all different sides. So you mentioned not only language, but music as well. I didn't expect music to come up today, but you're completely correct. I guess in the background of an advert, it can really attract the attention. We know that quite a lot of people aren't actually watching, for example, TV. And so if you're going to attract somebody's attention in a TV advert, sometimes at the beginning it has to be through noise. So there's a few ways you can do that. Famous people's voices is a good start. But I think music's a really nice way. And once again, it really can talk to a culture, I think. When you speak about music, does it tend to be more modern and I guess chart music that you tend to put forward in the work and the executions that you do? Or do you go down more of not necessarily an AI route, but something that's not so popular in the culture?
No, so it's definitely got to be popular, and we typically go down traditional music routes. I spoke of culture again, and in India we have a very rich tapestry of different sounds, and even within a single state you can have different kinds of music. So it's very important for us to stay rooted to tradition. Not only TV, it can also be delivered in a shopper environment as well. So we have means in the shopper environment where you can hear a familiar sound, and that can trigger things in your head which can drive preference as well.
I've never heard of that before. Lily, have you been in an environment before where you've heard a sound, maybe like a work related one, and it's driven you to a purchase?
It is like, if you actually think about it, and I'm going to talk about this from a consumer perspective, right? But think about you like maybe wandering in a shop, and there is always music, right? And music is actually part of the shopper experience, right? And it always has a purpose. It's either, like they want to make you feel comfortable, they want to make you feel relaxed, they want to make you feel upbeat, right? And sometimes it can be just a little kind of like emotional encouragement, to make sure you can actually drive that conversion or stay in that place longer, or just make your shopper experience more pleasant. So I think music has a really, really, really strong role to play on the shopper environment. And obviously, like we could talk endlessly about the impact that it could have on an ad from an emotional perspective, right? And how sometimes the music that you choose for a new ad could make or break completely the performance of the ad. So it's something that should not be overlooked, definitely.
That's so true. Here in the UK, when the festive season comes around, there's a lot of hype towards the Christmas ads, especially that the big retailers do, and consistently the songs that they use end up in the charts. It's so interesting to see every year. So I guess it's not only good for the brands as well if that happens, but also then the bands or the creators as well that create that music. I guess if they're up on those Spotify lists, it's probably doing quite a good job for them as well. So what's your view on the role of tools like attention heat maps or predictive analytics in creative workflows? So are they a shortcut or are they a superpower for you?
It depends on the execution and what you are trying to achieve. If I think about it, they are always incredibly helpful. The insights that they provide can be game changer for your execution. I can talk about an example where we wanted to launch a new product into market, and we basically had replicated the shelf of the shopping experience of consumers. So we recruited consumers that were specific of the category or the segment that we wanted to reach, and we basically asked them to go and have a shopping experience. And they were wearing this kind of like the Google kind of like AI glasses, and we were looking behind doors to see how they will behave, right? Because that's the absolute truth. There's no bias there. You will see right there if your product stands out or it doesn't, right? It's just as straightforward as that. It's just the most candid feedback you can get. And the reality is, like, the heat map, it's always the same or very similar to the shopper behavior. So in terms of creating standout or of execution on shelf, when you know your packaging needs to work really hard on a clutter environment where shoppers, they already know what brand they're going to buy, how much money they're going to spend, and they are only looking at a very specific section of the shelf, then I found those insights incredibly helpful to make sure they see you. So I think in those cases, it can definitely be a superpower, right? And sometimes is you want to be really quick in the execution. You have the product, you have the packaging, you want to be agile in terms of how you do it. And then this sort of like, for example, you could just put your packaging proposal into the AI scan and it will automatically tell you if the claims that you put in front of pack stand out. Where is the attention going on the heat map? And you don't even need to go and talk to consumers about it. You could just upload it and get insights within 1 or 2 minutes and create optimizations from that. So I would say it has both benefits. It depending on you can be doing something that is slightly more tactical and you want to move really fast, and then you can use it as a shortcut, but it's a powerful shortcut. Or you can do the whole thing, go put it in front of consumers, and then ensure that you have a proposition that is really going to be like solid and strong and distinctive and visible. So I think depends on the project. It could be used as a superpower, but also as a shortcut. But if it's used as a shortcut, it doesn't mean it's less efficient.
That's so true. And I like what you say about it really depends on the project. We know that there are sometimes times where the teams just need to get something out the door, and there just isn't time for a more traditional workflow. We know it can sometimes take so long and it can be so expensive. So I think that when those situations arise, to have some data or AI data is on a lot better than absolutely nothing. And it means that the teams can go forward with the confidence instead of just absolutely having no idea before pushing something live, which seems to be important to the brands that I work with.
Yeah, no, I think my views are very similar to Lily's. I think there are cases where it is a superpower. There are cases where it can be a shortcut. It's definitely in both cases. It's a super important helping hand in the decision making process. My fundamental view, however, is while it's useful to know where the eyes go, but I think it's more important to know where the heart goes, and so that's the most difficult part, and that's something that we try and get better at.
That's so true. Measuring where the heart goes. If you can find an AI for that, I think we'll all be on board for it because it's so individual, isn't it? We can decide whether something's going to be all right for an audience, but at the end of the day, you never know whether somebody's going to better feel towards one brand over another or one product over another. You never know what's going on in somebody's head, especially when they're shopping, because there's so much that goes into the shopping experience, from whether they want to actually pick up that cup of tea, what's on sale, whether they're having friends over, whether it's their first time buying tea, 100th time buying tea. You just never know, do you? Whether it's through heat maps or prediction models, it sounds like technology is deeply woven into today's creative process anyway. But looking ahead, though, things are evolving even more rapidly. So what excites you most and what worries you about where design and marketing are heading in this age of automation and AI?
So what really excites me, I actually think they both work hand in hand. I think they are incredible tools for developing innovation, for bringing new concepts into market, for even bringing creative ideas to life. I just think when it's used as a tool, it's incredibly powerful because it just helps the process being much more efficient, and it helps decisions to be you can make decisions faster and also be more agile in how you reach the market. So I think that part is really exciting, and how it can be used not only for I need a tweak on how I say this, right? It could be like, I need a completely new brand, I need to do a deep dive on what is new and different on this specific segment and category. I need to understand what are the future trends that are resonating with a specific segment. And I think that the beauty about AI is that you can get that information so much quicker, which allows the discussions to happen with a lot of rich information, right? So I think they work hand in hand because you have the information and then you need to have the human discussion to bring the heart as Madhukar was saying, right? And say like, okay, so how do we download all these different spaces into something that is really going to be relevant with the consumer, right? So I find that incredibly exciting because it means we can bring more innovation faster and make it more relevant for different markets. And the key thing that we just need to be really mindful is that is how we feed the algorithm, right? What are the cues that we give to the algorithm to get the outcome? So it's basically what's the brief, right? Because the way we are using it these days is actually as an agency partner. I could almost say it that way, right? It's an agency partner that is going to give you the trends, is going to give you the packaging input, it could give you the concept creation, right? But the brief needs to be spot on. You need to be really clear on your insights, and you still need to know very well your business. You still need to know your consumer, and you need the human side in order to make that as strong as possible. So I'm excited about the agility, but the capability to feed into the algorithm still needs to be really strong. And I think when those two things combined, it could be incredibly powerful outcome.
Yeah, I do agree. I think it takes a really special, a knowledgeable person to be able to properly feed an algorithm and ask the right questions to get a good output. And I think that's where maybe we'll hopefully start to see that evolving over the next few months and years. How can you properly question an AI tool to get exactly what you want out of it?
Yeah, for me, my fundamental belief is as humans, we each have an idea of who we are as persons, right? And when this idea of who I am wins, I feel great. This is who we are as humans. And brands that make consumers feel great about these ideas will always win. So I think, that fundamental is not going to change in the AI era either. In fact, I feel with AI, we have the potential to make us a little bit more human, like we saw in the cases that I talked about, the homemaker AI and the climate change examples. By helping us see things with more perspective, it can help us to shift perspectives and overcome biases, and that's what I'm most excited about. And but for me, the worrying bit is, of course, if it is used in ways that risks stripping marketing of joy and standing for all things not human, I think that would really be a pity.
That's so true. I think I'm in line with both of you on what excites me, but what worries me about it is I don't want it to get boring. I think if people are always questioning the same AIs in the same way, they're going to get the same outputs. And without really tapping into some of the really great creative minds that we know already exist in the world and overlooking them for AI, we might not be surrounded by some of the everything that gives us joy, all the surprises and the nuances that
Yeah.
come every year in new executions, which is what really excites me about working in the brand world and in marketing too. And I guess quickly then, before we wrap, is there one principle or piece of advice you think every creative team should keep in mind as they navigate data-driven design?
Well, I will say stay true to your brand purpose. Understand what your brand is trying to achieve and what are like the do's and don'ts on your brand. So you have a very clear framework of how to navigate your brand roadmap. I would say that's probably one thing. We have a very clear understanding of the barriers that you can push, and what are the territories that you can reach with your brand and where not to go, so you can stay true to the purpose and don't lose the consumer perspective or the point of view of the consumer, because even though the AI is fed from all this information that you can find online across different platforms, there is always going to be that gut feeling, emotional reaction to something that only consumers can deliver. So I would say keeping those two things really close when you are thinking about future execution is key to ensure the output is true to your brand and to your business.
Yeah, I'm just gonna talk about that principle that I spoke of. Is as marketers, we need to figure out what is this idea that consumers have of themselves, and we have to make that idea win through our executions and through our brand stories. I think if we do that, the consumers are going to feel great, and that is what's going to drive brand preference. So that's the single piece of advice that I would
Awesome. Thank you both so much for joining us today on the podcast. And that does bring us to the end of today's Game of Attention podcast. Once again, a huge thank you to you both, Lily and Madhukar, for joining us and sharing such thoughtful perspectives on creativity, culture, and the evolving role of data in design. As always, if you enjoyed this conversation, you can connect with us at Dragonfly AI and you can share the episode with your colleagues. We've got 2 lovely colleagues today from Tata, and thanks for listening. We will see you again next time.
That's a wrap for this episode. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Your support helps us keep bringing you fresh insights and expert advice. Want more content like this? Head over to dragonflyai.co and check out our resources page. Thanks for listening to Game of Attention. See you next time.